Explorers of old buildings, what is the creepiest, weirdest thing you have found so far? This wasn't really exploring as such. But back in the late 80s when Germany was still a divided country, I went to Berlin. When Berlin got divided, part of the West Berlin subway ended up under East Berlin territory. There were only 2 lines and a handful of stations affected, but when you took the subway on those 2 lines, you went via a few East Berlin stations before ending up back in West Berlin. The stations in the east weren't operating, they had just been boarded up to stop people from using them as an escape to the west. The trains didn't stop there, they just slowed down. There was barely any lighting in the stations, most of it really was just lit up from the train. Those stations basically had been abandoned, so the architecture and everything was unchanged from World War II times. It looked really eerie and creepy. Like stepping back in time. My aunt lives in an open field with a very large wooded area. I was exploring with my cousin, and we found an old rotten Barney doll. When we pushed on the doll to make it talk, its voice box was broken, making a muffled scream. It was very terrifying. Saw somebody had written their name, I assume, in poop in a ruined bakery. Once when me and my father did some building work on an old barn that's attached to his house, we found a glass bottle, heel of a shoe, and a dead bird skeleton in the wall. Apparently this is to keep witches away. There are historic tales of witches in the area, we still have the bird skeleton. Technically not creepy, but another group of explorers. Me and my cousin went to check out a former US Army base in my hometown. First we saw a couple making out having sex, not sure which one really, and tried to politely notify them that they weren't alone, to which they didn't respond. Later when it got darker, though, we kept hearing footsteps that stopped whenever we stopped to listen for them. When we started walking faster they did too, so we went full sprint and somehow ended up on the roof of that complex. When we looked into courtyard area we saw a group of younger kids emerge from a building and realized we were just scaring ourselves really. We had a nice chat, both parties trying act as if they weren't scared shitless just a few minutes ago, and we showed them how to get onto the roof. Oh, also. There was a Burger King there, and the kitchen was basically still fully intact, just no power. There were still burgers on the grill, and they didn't really look much different from how they look when you eat them. I didn't eat at BK for a while after that. I'm not a professional urban explorer, God, I wish, but something happened to me when I was exploring a house at the age of 11. So there's this old house in the middle of a field, near a nice town. My best friend at the time said that she had seen weird things happen in there, and she made it sound as if it was a ghost. I was pretty surprised, she had never had interest on creepy stuff, and now she was encouraging me to go with her so we could explore the house. I agreed, not because I wanted to go, it was kinda hard to get there, and I was feeling pretty lazy, but because I didn't want a 9 to 10-year-old girl go by herself to an abandoned house. I grabbed a light and headed to the house with her. There was tall grass, rocks and trash on our way there. I was getting nervous because if we had to run away it'd be impossible for us to get out faster than a grown person. We finally get to the house and walk in. We find nothing but trash and dusty furniture until my friend walks into a seemingly locked room and starts crying, screaming. I bolt down the hallway to her and find 3 to 5 dead dogs. Like, large to medium-sized dogs. Needless to say I was so scared and shocked I peed myself. We ran away crying hard as fuck. And that's why, kids, you always keep an eye on your children so they don't do stupid crap like we did. My friends and I went into an abandoned house once. It was like the whole family had just got up and left one day. There was a creepy family portrait that looked straight out of the 80s, but I'm pretty sure it was the family that had lived there. The kids' toys were scattered everywhere, and there were literally thousands of Chex tubs. They were everywhere, we thought they were actual Chex and took a bunch. We thought we were rich, I have no idea why, since actual Chex would have been worthless too. I was exploring an old Vinley factory as I'm a huge fan of Vinley, was hoping to score some free Vinley laying about somewhere. The place was a very tall white building, run down now as it had been shut down for years. Still had all the large presses there though, which was cool, but no molds, so that was sad. Walked into a room where the roof had given in and I looked up to see the rafters full of birds. That's not what was creepy. I took a few steps into the room to hear a loud crunch. I looked down to realize the floor was layered with dead birds and their poop. Like must have been 100 plus dead birds and their poop, just layer after layer, nowhere else in the whole building, but this room. Nope, out of there. There's a ridge and on either side are valleys. The ridge and the valley are in the Australian bush, which is very thick, and the best way to enter either valley is after a good fire has been through. Like the fire that cleared everything away in 2002. In each valley, which is either side of the ridge, is a cave, 2 caves. The first cave, the most accessible of the 2, is open, white, and has red earth beneath its hanging rock. The eaves are of a bright sandstone. Great cave, a great place to camp. Now on the other side of the ridge, in the other valley, is the other cave. Now, the other cave is a little different, they're both similar but feel different. The other cave is harder to reach and is of a darker stone. People have been there before with candles. This cave is hidden by trees, but it's large inside with drawings on the sandstone walls. It is a dark cave, not just because it is hidden behind dark trees or because it always feels damp, the cave just feels wrong, and then of course the drawings. They look to be made from sand mixed with water. Some show people, one shows what looks like 3 figures pointing up at something, but the spookiest image on the wall is of a face, a bird-like face which sits above a smaller cave entrance, leasing under the cave wall to who knows where, because I'm in no damned hurry to go crawling on my hands and knees around under a cave wall and into the pitch black. Then there was that powerful owl I saw down there eating a possum. A rare bird, that one, big too. A bloody great big owl was watching me when I was down there once. The fact you might fall and break a leg getting in and out of the valley adds to the grimness of entering down there. But it just feels wrong, and if you go wandering off the track you'll find that there are some places, still untamed, that just don't feel right. There are plenty of untamed places where you can feel very at peace, but that cave is not one of them. I was exploring this area with a few old dilapidated houses. Inside one of them I found probably around 5,000 to 10,000 old political signs for my city. I mean, this house was absolutely overflowing with them. I looked up some info on the name that was on the signs and found out that one of the people running had accused the other candidate of having someone pull up all her signs, but they never had any proof. I looked up who owned the land that the house was on, and it was the other candidate's brother. Basically, I solved a nearly 2-decade-old case of election fraud or whatever it was. It was a huge deal in the news back then, and couldn't tell anyone because I was a shithead kid that was trespassing. In the 80s, in southeast Texas, my brother and I were walking down a creek and fishing when we saw an old abandoned house in the woods. Since we weren't catching anything worth keeping, we decided to explore it. Half the doors were locked, but we ended up through the living room area when we saw a mattress and stuff was piled up in front of the stairs. We decided to climb over it and go upstairs. As I walked up the stairs, I turned to make sure my brother made it over, and when I turned back around, I almost went face first into a skeleton of a large bird hanging by a string in the stairway. It startled me, but mostly I thought it was odd. When I reached the top of the stairs, I looked around the large dark empty room, only to realize it wasn't empty. The floor was completely covered with small bones. We heard something downstairs, so we went to the only window of the room and looked down onto the garage roof. We didn't want to go back the way we came, so we jumped out the window, grabbed our rod reels and ran off. To this day my brother swears he looked back and saw an old woman in that window watching us run away. 2 years ago with some friends, we found an old abandoned house and decided to go visit it during the night. It was around 11 p.m. Everyone was slightly drunk, and we were making jokes and laughing while getting into the house, so we weren't very quiet. We got into the house, nothing unusual, judging by the house furnitures. The owners left at least 10 years ago. We couldn't get into the basement because the door was locked. We heard noises coming from the other side of the door, but we thought it was animals or something. We were used to explore abandoned buildings, and meeting wild animals was frequent. A few minutes in, we got into a bedroom and find an undone bed without any dust on it. The room smelled like someone slept here and didn't open the windows to ventilate. You know that smell. I walked to the other side of the bed and nearly stepped on a shit ton of empty painkillers, heavy medication boxes. There was approximately 20 boxes here, plus some needles were on the ground. No one was laughing now, and we decided to leave. We all got scared. Later we found out that some sort of crackhead was living here. We probably scared him and he decided to hide in the basement. I prefer to don't imagine what would have happened if we had broken the basement door and felt face to face with him. Well, as someone who's a firm believer of the paranormal, I've explored many locations as I thought would be haunted. One that sticks out the most was when me and my buddies were seniors in high school. We caught wind of a location not too far from us, so we decided to head out to it. It was an old burned down mansion off the base of a mountain in California. We got there and all there really is the foundation and some of the walls up that could have been a room. What got us was not the house itself but what was in the backyard. I'm sure there was some satanic rituals held there because of the pentagrams and dead animals. When we found that everything from the atmosphere and our health started to change. I got sick to the point I threw up. My buddy that drove us kept feeling like someone was after him, and my other friend felt drained and wanted to lay down. We decided it was time to leave cause we didn't want to stick around to find whomever was behind the rituals. As we were leaving his car wouldn't start, so he popped it in neutral and rolled down the hill from where we were parked. We got back to the main road and his car started right on up, but the creepy shit still followed us. His radio kept going static with an occasional woman voice coming over asking for us to come back. We got to a local skate park and everything died down, and we never went back to that location. Me and my girlfriend have a habit of going around to really old abandoned houses to explore. I have a bag dedicated for this. With respirator masks, flashlights, first aid kits etc. I have 2 stories. One weird and one scary. 1. We pull up to this really old looking place. In the middle of nowhere, door is unlocked, but something is blocking it. So we go around to the back and I kick the door in. First thing I do is go move the dresser in front of the front door so we can get out easier. Then take stock of the place. It's a trashed out mess. Animal droppings cover about 40% of the floor. And about 20% of what's left of the floor has caved into the basement. So we start to look around, and at this point we put the masks on because the air is foul and dusty. We walk into what used to be a living room, and we both begin to laugh for a long ass time. Because in the living room, smack dab in the middle, is a toilet with a fake flower next to it, sticking out of an old coffee tin. And it's facing an old dinosaur of a TV sitting on top of a 5-gallon bucket. It was such a weirdly peaceful setup. TV didn't work or anything, but it was the quaint little scene, and it was funny as. 2. This is the scary one. Different day, different house. Pull up and there's a small gate. But we don't even hop it because just the look of this place is freaky AF. I don't normally freak out if something looks scary, but this is different. The front yard was full of garbage, stacked about 5 feet high. The house was this disgusting old orange color. But just looked freaky AF. I can't really describe it, but I promise you, just the sight of this house had me sweating. And I've seen and been in some scary ass houses. I take out my little mini $10 drone with a GoPro duct tape to it. Fly it around a bit around the house and bring it back. Return to the laptop in my car and watch the footage. House is freaky. But then I realized the garbage and old furniture in the front yard is arranged into a giant cross, which was so large you could only see from above. We noped the fuck out of there real quick. As the feeling of being watched was eating away at our nerves. We got back in the car, deleted every picture we took, and the GoPro video and haven't even gone within 10 miles of it since.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Reddit stories.